Hello, everybody. I'm Dave Veenstra,
And I'm Sierra West.
and we are here to share with you
Oh,
the
Mesosystem.
Mesosystem.
Case 5.
The Mesosystem is part of the ecological systems theory. It's the second level of it, and it's basically where the individual is interacting with small groups in their immediate vicinity, immediate interaction.
It includes teachers, parents, neighborhood, and community members.
Perfect. Oh, oops.
So, our case study is taking place in a small town in New England, Peterson Elementary. And there are a couple things that we feel like are really important to mention about this school. So, it's relatively affluent, it's culturally homogenous, and it provides a robust system of after school programs and supports for its students.
Yeah, we're definitely not dealing with an inner city school with no funding.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so our characters that we're dealing with. The first character we're going to introduce you to is Principal Dick Leonard. He is an experienced principal. He's been doing this for quite a while. In response to some state guidelines, he has done away with the grading system, the ABCD grading system, and he has instead instituted a standards-informed system where students are graded based on whether they meet the standards or don't meet the standards. And he expresses in the case study that he has a concern about a lack of parental involvement and is highly concerned with increasing and maintaining a high level of academic rigor for his school.
Our other faculty member is Miss Tammy Gray. She's the first grade teacher. She's really well respected and experienced in the school. She's been working with a first grade student named Nate all year to improve his reading. He came in at below grade level, and she's really worked with him to bring him up to grade level, and she's cited him as one of her major achievements throughout the year. But she's very concerned that throughout the summer break, he will revert back to below grade level.
So this brings us to our non-faculty characters. Our first character over here is Nate. Nate is the boy. He's a first grader. He does not like to read and was deficient when he entered into first grade this year, but likes Ms. Gray a lot and has been working with her quite a bit and has now improved his reading quite often. Molly, Nate's mom. Molly is kind of our protagonist of the story. She's a mother. A mother of two. She works part-time. She's a suburban mom. She is confused about Nate's progress. She thinks that Nate is doing much better than the teacher thinks Nate is doing. And she thinks that Nate does not need to go into a summer program. And she expresses a lot of those.
That brings us to Margot, who's Molly's friend who has a fourth grader at the school. And the bulk of the conflict in our case is about the new grading system and the lack of the communication and parent events that are happening in the school. And Margot and Molly kind of discuss that throughout the case.
Okay, so we have these three major issues that we're going to be dealing with over the course of our case study. But we both agreed that this first issue up here is the one that is kind of the root of all other problems. And it's how can they communicate the progress between the parents and the school? All of our other issues are kind of stemming from that one.
And those two other issues would be parents not being able to interpret academic progress and maybe see how it's helping their student, and state policy influencing school reform. And we're going to talk about each of these later on in the presentation.
So in order for us to really delve into these issues, we identified two academic concepts in the book that we need to detail out. So the first one is social executive functioning. Social executive functioning is a model that describes the executive functioning of an individual. Executive functioning is when an individual, it's the way that they manage, evaluate information. It's the behavior that they exert when they get new information. And it's dealing with the social executive functioning has two parts to it. The first part is the individual, and that's what all adults have, right? It's what all adults have that are high functioning. But the second part of it is the groups or the systems version, and that's where you're dealing with children who have not fully developed their executive functioning abilities, and so parts of those executive functions are used by adults, by parents or teachers.
An example for a parent in this situation would be screening a movie or a piece of literature before letting their child see it or read it. And a teacher example would be helping a child deal with bullying on the playground. Maybe the child doesn't know how to emotionally deal with that issue, so the teacher is going to help them walk through it.
And when the parent and the teacher chimes in and does something, that's called an executive functionary, because they're doing the executive function for the child. If this works correctly, if the group system works correctly, then the child will become an adult who doesn't need help. They'll become an independent functioning adult.
So our other theoretical concept that we need to discuss is developmental contextual perspective. And this is the idea that child development and parent well-being are interrelated, and you can see how they're interrelated on the slide. So the child development is going to be affected by the parent, and the parent will be affected by the child.
I think the most important thing that we need to focus on here is that it's a bilateral change, right? So it's both. It's not unidirectional; it's bidirectional, and so it means that the parent isn't just changing the child is changing the parent. And the other thing is that this also isn't necessarily just parents. This is basically anyone in the mesosphere. So the children are affecting the teachers, and the teachers are affecting the children back and forth. So let's address the first questions that we got here. The first big root question is how to communicate about the child's progress. So what we find is that the biggest issue here is that the parents don't seem to understand what the standards are. They don't know how to measure things. They don't know what, like, there's an example in the case study of portfolios where the teachers are giving portfolios, and these portfolios are filled with work and with standards, but the parents don't understand what that means, and so it's meaningless to them, essentially. The grading system just doesn't make sense to the parents. They don't get it. They don't understand it at all. And that's a big problem there.
And the parents don't understand how to measure progress because there's no letter system. It's standards informed. And so it's really the teacher's job to kind of make the transition for them. And in this case, the teacher isn't being very clear about what this standards informed process looks like. She uses a 4-point rubric in our case, and she asks the parents if they have any questions, but most of the time she really doesn't get any response, which indicates that they don't know the questions to ask, or they don't understand it at all.
All of these things are kind of contributing together to make Peterson Elementary into what we would call a fortress school. So a fortress school is a school that is essentially closed off from parental involvement, where the parents aren't part of the decision making, they're not part of the grading, they're not part of anything, and so and the parents don't feel welcome, they don't feel free to express themselves to the school, express their concerns, to speak to the school. And we think that the unclear grading system, the unclear standards, the unclear teachers have all contributed to this fortress school mentality.
So our next major issue would be dealing with the parent concerns for academic progress. So on the parent side, we have Molly, who believes that Nate is at grade level reading and doesn't need any summer supports. And then on the teacher side, we have Miss Gray, who has worked with Nate throughout the school year to bring him up to grade level reading and is very concerned about his summer break. They essentially disagree on what progress is because they disagree on what the quality of work looks like. Molly is having Nate read the back of cereal boxes, bright and colorful things that look fun in the bus station, and the same library books over and over again at nighttime. So the quality of reading material is not really being not it's not there's no continuity there, and they don't really have effective communication either. Molly volunteers in the school and she works with Nate in the classroom, but she hasn't explicitly told Miss Gray, I'm working with him outside of class, and Miss Gray hasn't explicitly given her the resources or told her what a quality reading material should look like for Nate.
Yeah. The other issue that we have is how state policy is influencing the school reforms. Our case study didn't give us a lot of information about the state standards. They're pretty vague. But what we do know about the state standards is that the students are evaluated through testing, and that the principal has been given a directive to evaluate the students based on standards. And the principal has also been given a directive that the school needs to educate the parents on what those standards are, and that the parents were supposed to be involved in that process. As best we can tell from what Molly and Margot are saying in the dialogue, no parents were involved in the process, and they're confused, they don't understand it, and they don't like it. So this is a disconnect between what the state standard was and what the principal's done.
The principal also feels like without a big investment in some sort of technology or LMS, that there will be a communication breakdown between the school and the parents. And this just adds to the feeling of parents not being allowed or invited to be involved in policy or procedure making. And the non-academic social gatherings that were canceled really damaged the culture of the school, because it's just now making the parents feel like outsiders in their students' education.
Yeah. Okay, so looking at those questions, we've identified a bunch of next steps that we think should be changed. That way we could replay the case, and by replaying the case with our changes, having our changes implemented, we think we would get different results.
So in order to progress, Principal Leonard needs to really focus on moving the school culture from a fortress school to a partnership school. And he can do this by hosting events to educate the parents on what this new grading system is and how it can help them and their student. This will reduce barriers and help the parents navigate through the school related tasks and possibly resume social gatherings like potlucks that were mentioned in our case. By doing this, he's going to create a school culture that really fosters cooperation and goodwill between teachers and parents.
On the school-wide level, that's what needs to get done, but the teachers also need to take those changes and bring them into the classroom. We really feel like the Ms. Gray and the other teachers need to communicate more clearly about what the performance checks are. We have some evidence that we suspect Ms. Gray, she was giving portfolios, she was giving progress checks, but the parents weren't understanding that. And so we think that there's a possibility that she was using like academic jargon or like pedagogical jargon, something like that is making it less clear. So we think that she needs to communicate more and more clearly with the parents.
And on the flip side, the parents really need to be proactive in checking in about their students' progress, not just during report cards or progress checks with the teachers that are school organized. They need to be willing to give the teacher a call and ask about how they can help foster educational well-being for their student, not just, hey, how is my student doing this week? And they need to be more open to this standards informed grading system, because they might find that it's really useful for them and their student.
The other thing that we've noticed with both the parents and the teachers, we noticed it in the dialogue between Margot and Molly, and we noticed it in the interview dialogue with Ms. Gray, is that both the parents and the teachers seem to have an opinion that the other isn't doing their job, that the parents aren't doing what they're supposed to, or that the teachers aren't doing what they're supposed to. This is corrosive to communication. What we need is we need both of them to assume goodwill. We need the teachers to assume that the parents do care and are working with their children. And we need the parents to assume that the teachers are helping the kids and have the kids' best interests at heart. This way, if the teacher recommends something for Nate, the parent won't immediately dismiss it, because the parent will be like, oh, I trust Miss Gray. She has Nate's best interest in mind, right? So that we need them to assume goodwill with each other.
And when you replay case number 5, you can see that just by fixing the communication issues between the school, the teachers, the parents, that you really get a more deeper understanding of what the student needs and a more productive mesosystem.
And that is case 5 and the mesosystem. Thank you very much.